Hi, it's Dan from Plant to Health. Is there such a thing as food addiction? What can we do about it? Is there any way to fight it? Let's find out next. While addiction is a very complex subject matter, and we're obviously not going to get into all the specific details about that, food addiction is hotly debated whether it's a real thing or not. I do believe that it is real, and I consider myself a food addict, a recovering food addict. And the way that it happens, I believe, is that we've been accustomed to consume hyper-palatable foods, or actually food products mostly, that are unnatural, and our body isn't used to that level of palate stimulation, which causes a dopamine release. The junk foods and highly processed foods, the high fatty and sugary foods that we are eating in our Western society is not something that the human body was accustomed to. And I call those foods sledgehammer foods because they hit your reward center, your dopamine reward pathways, like a sledgehammer. You're not giving it a gentle stroke like it's supposed to get when it receives good, wholesome, healthy food. You're giving it a smack in the face, upside the head. What happens is our bodies need to accustom and they need to regulate it. And what they do is they basically down-regulate the dopamine receptors, meaning if you're constantly slamming your reward centers with these hyperpalatable, sugary, fatty, salty foods, what you're getting is a large dopamine release every time you eat. This large dopamine release, so where the body is forced to actually withdraw some of the dopamine receptors because it's getting too much dopamine. That's what actually happens in the process of addiction. The body downregulates the dopamine receptors because it's getting hit constantly with dopamine, and therefore the addictive substance, in this case food, becomes less enjoyable and you need more of it just to feel content. Why do I consider myself to be a food addict? Well, all my life, as I've said several times, I've been an overweight person, sometimes obese, and I was addicted to junk foods. I love junk foods. I grew up on junk foods. I ate junk food before I was vegan over 11 years ago and kept eating vegan junk food as vegan. And only when I stopped eating those foods did I realize that I was in fact a food addict. But not all hope is lost, as I found out. You can break the cycle. Yes, we can do it. I can do it, so can you. Here's the thing. When you stop eating those junk foods, and yes, I know it's a big undertaking. It's a tall order to stop eating those pizzas and cookies and chocolates and fried foods and all of those delicious, they really are delicious. They're too delicious, actually. All of those delicious foods, when you stop eating them and you start eating whole plant foods, natural foods that the body recognizes, at first they might taste a little bland to you, but over time your dopamine receptors can actually go back to their normal sensitivity, meaning upregulate, and then you get a pleasure response from eating things like a sweet potato or a potato or a sweet apple and other wholesome, healthy foods that are actually good for you. And people don't understand this because they think of that healthy food as boring or dull or, not as tasty. When the matter of fact is our entire palate is skewed. We've messed it up. We've skewed it toward these hyper-palatable, super rich, processed, unnatural foods. And when we take those away and we go back to eating more naturally, then our receptors upregulate, and then we can enjoy these whole natural foods. And I don't suffer at all with my diet. I actually enjoy it very much. There's a lot of creativity and there's a lot of flavor, and of course I know that I'm doing the best thing I can do for myself, for my body, for my health, for my longevity. So actually eating a whole food plant-based diet without oil, low fat, is your best weapon against food addiction. So if you want to break that cycle, the best way to do it is to eat whole plant foods. And you'll find that within between 3 weeks to 3 months, your taste buds will have changed completely. Your preferences will have changed completely. And you'll find the foods that you used to find attractive, desirable, and crave for them, you'll find them to be not as interesting, not as attractive, and in some cases even straight up repulsive. So this actually is a great way to curb cravings and uncontrolled eating. I was also eating very large quantities of food, and it's much easier to control your quantities when you're eating whole plant foods as opposed to junk foods, which are very tasty, very palatable, very hard to stop eating them, like those commercials allude to. Also, one more thing is what's called the 100% rule. What it means basically is that it is much harder to go 90-something% of the way as opposed to 100%. When you have a clear boundary and you say to yourself, this is off limits, I'm not touching this, it's much easier to comply and to adapt that as a lifestyle. And you know that certain things are just off limits, and also simply you just don't bring them into your house, so it's much easier to adopt that kind of lifestyle when, one, you're not letting yourself those small percentages of things that are actually harming you, which leave that sort of craving still lit on that back burner, ready to jump in full force at any minute, and also keeping them away from you physically, from your physical environment, which is obviously a huge factor in avoiding those foods. Well, I've been clean, so to speak, of those food addictions for 4.5 years now, but I'm always aware, I'm always guarded, I'm always cognizant of the fact that I could slip and fall at any minute if I just let myself go, because I know those foods have a massive effect on me as someone who is more prone to food addictions, and I believe also to addictions generally, which is why I'm also a straight edge. I stay away from any kind of drug, alcohol, and so on. Well, that's it for today. I know it's an interesting subject and there's a lot to say about it, but I don't want to make this video too long. So just remember, eat whole plant foods and you only stand to lose the weight, diabetes, the heart disease, and so much more. See you next time.